Well, thanks everyone for being here. Obviously, thanks Maarten as well for joining us. I think I recognise most of you, but for those of you who don't know me, my name is Barry Cranford, the organiser of the London CTOs. So this event is happening today. Basically, I met Maarten at a meet and greet about a month ago, maybe just over. And obviously, we meet lots of different people through various groups, through the London CTOs, the fractional community, and various things that we do. And every now and again, you think, this is somebody I need to speak to more and find out a bit more about it. So we then ended up jumping on a call, and Maarten started talking about this. We started screen sharing. It got very, very interesting very, very quickly. And so I asked him if he'd be open to doing that with a bit of a wider audience. Without further ado, I'll introduce Maarten Ectors to give this presentation on NextTech.
Perfect. Thank you. So for those that don't know me, a little bit of history. I started work a long time ago, but I started really innovating when I, in 2009, at Nokia Networks, started introducing them and the whole telecom sector to cloud computing. I worked also for Mr. Ubuntu, Mark Shuttleworth, first space tourist and the first African in space, where I helped Ubuntu both like with their cloud strategy, and afterwards I set up IoT business and have been working with a lot of technology innovators. Being also the Chief Innovation Officer for Legal in general, during my time, I think it was the first time in 185 years that like they became technology award winning. And the last years, I've been helping lots and lots of startups to do very cutting edge innovations, all in the space of AI, Web3, IoT, spatial, and GreenTech, and HealthTech, and so on. And I'll mention some of them later on. So what is the future going to bring, and how will it impact all of us? That's the question I want to answer today. So let's look at like what has happened in the last year. Basically, if there's one technology that like everybody talks about, it is generative AI. Everybody has seen ChatGPT, Midjourney, all types of like AI generated stuff. So I don't have to tell anybody that Gen AI has come from out of nowhere and in a year transformed lots and lots of things in the creative world. So if we now think about like the future, where is Gen AI going to end up, and where is AI going to take it? Well, if we just take entertainment and we would think about Gen AI 2027, well, potentially we are in a world where like Netflix wouldn't have like pre-created content, but could like take base content and adapt it on the fly to what we like. We could basically see personalized movies. We're watching them alone on the sofa. Somebody joins. We can then ask for it to be the script to be adapted. If somebody doesn't like a character, you can ask the movie to kill them in the next scene or whatever. And if we look at like things like advertisement, well, today you still have to do a lot of work to see all those ads. But what if the ads become so smart that like they do most of the work for us and just in one click allow us to solve like problems like finding the perfect birthday gift? So those type of things can all come, but they wouldn't really change a lot in the world. So if we really want to understand foundational things changing in the world, what would those be? And one foundational thing is like our energy. So if we look at like our energy and we want to understand where we're going, what we actually need to do is zoom out and look at where we're coming from. So if we look at like electricity, for instance, we in the 90s could have like mobile phones and laptops. The only thing is you had to have two conditions. You had to be a bodybuilder because these things were so heavy that like portable wasn't really the word, and mobile was even worse. And you had to be a rich bodybuilder because like they costed enormous fortunes. Now, in 10 years' time, they went from like really bulky, really heavy to very small and like affordable by like well-off families, the better off group of the population. 10 years later again, the prices started coming down, and batteries specifically now could drive computers in your pocket that were more powerful than like anything ever seen before. And the price of battery went down so much that we could actually start using it in like super expensive cars. Again, 10 years later, and we're now around our time, using batteries in cars is becoming the normal thing. In the UK, you've seen lots of EVs on the road now, and we're close to the point where an EV is as expensive as an internal combustion engine, and soon it will be cheaper. Actually, generating electricity with solar is now the cheapest option. And we're seeing that batteries can no longer only be used to like drive a car, but actually also like be a buffer for like smaller cities and so on. And that like not even 3G single-threaded mobile phone all of a sudden is now a super phone that we've never seen anything similar. Now, if we take that same exponential cost reduction and we translate it into what's going to happen in the next 10 years, well, if we can already put up like quite big solar fields, then the amount of like solar we can put up will be exponentially more, because solar is going to both be cheaper to deploy, produce more energy, and there's like new materials that just came out that like were like 50% more productive. All those type of things will continue to improve and cost will continue to go down. As such, we can see that like in deserts, we'll be able to mass deploy these things. On the sea, we'll be able to mass deploy them. It's not only solar, so it wouldn't be that only during the day, but it can also be wind. And as such, we're likely going to go, and if you want to read more, Tony Seba would be the person to look at his work, because he has mapped out exactly how much each country needs to be completely self-sufficient. And his prediction is very much, we're going to have too much energy. So we're going to start producing green hydrogen when there's overproduction, which we can then use in totally new things like flying. Now, with that overproduction, we can do other things as well. We can start taking salt water, desalinate it, and use it to make farms where like before we couldn't do farming. So we can like create new food in places. We could even like heat up places that were too cold to grow food. So our food supply can change completely. But actually where it's going to change more is like how we cook and deliver food. So if you look at like how food could be created, well, it's more likely to become a robotic process where food is created by robots than it is by humans. And food being delivered by robots will also become the norm in the next decade. But the most interesting one, I think, is how food will be created. So if you look at like Redefine Meat and others, these are 3D printing experts in food. So they're no longer looking to print a hamburger. Redefine Meat is working with top chefs in the world, and they think that like they can print the best, most expensive steaks next year, and they're already printing a lot of variants of steaks that top chefs are really excited about. So having a 3D steak printer is probably one of the new things that will come in the next years, And the same is happening with fish. And now, if you think about it, if you can like make it ad hoc, you could add special ingredients. You could make it at a scale and an efficiency that like we can't do before. So perhaps we don't need that many supermarkets. Perhaps we don't need supermarkets, but perhaps it becomes cheaper to actually have food brought to our home than to cook it ourselves. So that's one of the changes. Now, if we look at like another sector, telecom, and I mentioned to you that I started a big part of my career there. We are seeing for the first time that like the 4,000 plus Starlink satellites now start to communicate among one another with laser. Now, one of the cool advantages of that is that like it's in a vacuum. So the speed of like sending data from one satellite to another one in vacuum and having enough of them will mean that like it probably will be faster to like use satellites to communicate messages from one side of the world to another one than to do it on Earth. So satellite communication will become important, and you can already see that larger vehicles now can have Starlink antennas on them. T-Mobile in the US is working with Starlink on making it that any mobile can communicate directly without any change with the satellites. And of course, that will not be for like city use or even urban use, but more for rural use. Telecommunication is going to change completely, though, in cities and urban areas, not because of satellites, but because we will start running our own networks. I don't know if you've seen what Helium has done in, I think it's Miami, but they're now offering people the capability of running their own mobile network nodes, and a data plan there with unlimited data is now $5 a month. And the reason that's possible is a revolution where I've been helping in 2016 to start it, which is open source software-defined radios. So these are, and I should have taken it because I have one here at home, but these are boards that you just connect to computers and then do whatever radio that you want through software. And we're seeing, for instance, in telecom, a lot of open RAN, which is open radio access networks. And that means that it will become exponentially cheaper for everybody to run their own base stations, that being first building operators, then individual companies, then at your home, your broadband modem will soon also be a mobile base station. So that will change how telecom is being done. Now, I'd like to ask Ken, Mark, and Alex if you thought about like what shoes we're going to wear on Mars.
I have no idea.
Mark, Ken?
I'm more worried about what shoes I'm going to wear tomorrow or this afternoon. It's a good question. No, I haven't thought about it.
Mark?
No, I could probably give some characteristics. They'd have to be able to deal with a vacuum. They'd have to be hard wearing, but apart from that, nothing.
Okay, Mark, do you think you know this person that like might have thought about it?
Ah, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah,
so,
we know this.
So basically, if you think about like if you would be an individual that wanted to start a colony on Mars, and every trip would be 9 months, you wouldn't be able to go and say like, oh, let's wait for new shoes another 9 months. You'd have to be in a position to basically produce everything on Mars. But before you get there, you need to have trillions to get, and the capability to actually go to Mars and build that up. So what Elon Musk has done until now is like, let's disrupt markets that like produce things that I will need in the future on Mars, or can give me lots of money. so that I can subsidize the project to get to Mars. So if we take shoes as an example, we now have the first robots that can produce shoes. They're potentially not as good as they should be, but in an exponential world, it's just a matter of time before they become. Now, if you think about putting those specific robots in containers and make like robot factories by having one or potentially a couple of containers connected to one another, you could think about like, hey, we could now have a world of personalized shoes. And unlike the gigafactories which make Tesla cars, robot containers could be put into a starship and shot to Mars. But if you wanted to like start using this concept, you don't have to wait until you have your Mars colonies. You could basically move those containers close to where a lot of people live and say like, hey, you want any personalized shoes? We can like print them, stitch them, or otherwise make them the way you like them and when you want them. And then what you can do is you can have one of these, and this is a drawing of what it could look like, but Elon Musk already clearly said he's going to have a robot taxi without mirrors, without steering wheel, and without pedals. So a robot taxi can drive to those containers a little bit outside of London, pick up your shoes, and who picks them up? Anybody knows what this humanoid is called? No? He's called Optimus, and you'll might see, if you look Optimus, Tesla Optimus, then you might see videos of like where on the first AI day, a little bit over a year ago, he couldn't even stand up. They had to artificially keep him on some kind of frame, and he could flap his hands and legs a little bit. 1 year later, you can now see videos where Optimus can do yoga. And why is this important? Because we've seen all these like other robotics companies like Boston Robotics and so on, like do very fancy things. Well, the difference between Optimus and a Boston Robotics robot is that Tesla has designed Optimus to be mass producible in the same factories as they produce their Teslas, because they want to use the Optimus robots to help them produce faster cars, but also to sell them in the future for about $20,000 to first businesses and afterwards individuals to do work. And if you now think, why would Musk want to have that? Well, if he can have shoe factories in these robot containers where the Optimuses bring the material, take the shoes, get into a robot taxi, walk on stairs, take an elevator, press your doorbell, and now hand deliver the shoes, but also hand deliver anything from the food we talked about to whatever other product, then you can clearly see that like this is going to be the biggest threat to Amazon ever. The only thing that you would need is an app where you could like order everything to be personalized and delivered. That might be the reason why he bought Twitter and called it X, because it will become the everything app to ask for everything that you need. And that's a typical thing Musk does. He like, once he's like working on something, like he was working in 2018 on like mass producing Teslas, he tends to like distract people by saying it's so hard and I have to fire everybody and I don't know how to do this and that and we're going to, but often he's like a magician, waving one hand and doing something quite innovative with the other one. So don't underestimate this type of things. Now, if we look at a totally different sector, and I told you before that I was Chief Innovation Officer for Legal & General, who is one of the leaders in investment management, or the biggest investment manager here in the UK and also in insurance. I put the reinsurance business on the blockchain about like 2019, but in general, financial services is not using enough smart contracts and crypto and so on. And the reason why I think a big disruption will happen there is that if you just look at like one of the most prominent solutions to integrate credit card payments, it's Stripe. And Stripe, every time that we present a piece of plastic to a merchant, will charge that merchant between 1.5 and 2.5% plus 20p. That 20p explains why in a store by a local owner, they don't like you to pay under £5, because if you would pay for £0.5 with a credit card, then like that owner would like pay more than 20p already just to take your money. And that is about to be changed. And yes, X is going to introduce, because there was an interview where Musk says he wants to be your bank account by the end of next year. But actually, PayPal, which he started, and Telegram are already further ahead. In Telegram, and this is a screenshot of my Telegram wallet, you can already use what's called stablecoins. And a stablecoin basically means somewhere in the world, in a bank account, $1 is being put, and then somebody generates, in this case, a USDT from Tether, but you also have a USDC from Circle and others. And if you now bring that USDT or USDC back to the company that generated it, you can get a real USD back. So those stable coins can already be used for payments and are being used for payments. And there's a small difference between like that Stripe and stablecoin payments. Because if you do them on one of the faster chains like Solana, you're not paying 0.2 as a fixed fee. You're paying $0.00025, which is about like 20p divided by 1,000. So you pay 1,000 times less than the fixed cost Stripe charges you, let alone the percentage. So there's an enormous big reason why soon we will see e-commerce move to stablecoin, because they can cut out all this banking middle grease that is just too expensive. And think about like AI and generative AI being able to help us understand how we have to deal with our finances, how to get a loan, how to invest, and so on. And you can see how investment management, loan applications, and so on can be totally different. But there's actually an even bigger innovation in this space, which I call the decentralized finance combined with AI, so the DeFi. And that's tokenization. Now, with tokenizations, you can create your own tokens. So I talked about stable coins, where one stable coin is equal to the equivalent in dollars, pounds, euros, or whatever stable coin you want to use. But you can create your own token that could represent a fractional ownership of something. So if we take, for instance, a £1 billion building, if you want to sell it, you need to find somebody with £1 billion to sell that. If you would generate 1 million tokens, you can basically for £1,000 sell a fraction of that building, almost for no transaction costs. Think about the 25 divided by 1,000 transaction cost. And you can also automate revenue coming out of that building. So if that building ever gets sold, funds now get like moved to the ones holding the fractional ownership. If apartments or offices get rented, they can all be automated. And that tokenization of like real assets is something really, really interesting that's currently happening. And it's not only buildings, but like we talked about energy, you could basically have your solar panel automatically through these smart contracts and tokens, tokenize the electricity it produces and trading it on an open market without any human intervention. You can have risk being tokenized. You can have like anything being tokenized and exchanged on markets, being loaned, being used as collateral, and so on. So there's a lot of innovation going to happen here. Now let's go to another sector, healthcare. I don't like the word healthcare because it basically means the focus is you're healthy, I don't care, and when you're unhealthy, I care. Well, that's the first thing that I think will be disrupted, because the better solution is to make sure you get less sick in the first place. So if you can make it that humans get less sick in the first place, or that we find very quickly that like you're developing some kind of cancer in the pre-cancer stage, it will be so much easier to take care of that than to wait until you have stage 3 or 4. And the ways we can do that are various. So wearables and home kits will become even more cheaper than they are. And most of us are already wearing a device that tracks our heartbeat and other type of things. And soon you will be able to like test a lot of things with a drop of blood. And I know there has been a US company that was promoting this, but often these things just come too early and they can't be made to work. But it will just be some time before like that one drop of blood can be analyzed at home. You'll be asked every so many weeks to donate a blood drop to see how your health is doing. It'd be even, and this is one of Musk's innovations again, able to implant a neural link that can immediately talk to your brain. So we might actually be able to like have the computer speak for us in different languages and make different languages understood to us. So the way that we interact might change completely. And another thing, if we look at generative AI, our DNA are just simple letters. And we can't really look at billions of those letters and the combination being very important. Generative AI is super good at like understanding the relationship between letters, because that's how ChatGPT works. So if we can like automatically make things by combining DNA, then we can create our own cells and our own vaccines, our own medicine, our own anything. So if you're going to be a programmer, the future will probably be programming cells as like one of the future jobs. And think about that food delivery. Why do I think food will be changed? Well, if we cook for ourselves, we tend to eat unhealthy. If the robots could like bring us personalized food that is created with the extra iron, the extra vitamin, the extra protein that our body needs based on like what we just measured or were measured, then we can actually like live a lot healthier, because a lot of cancers and other diseases like diabetes come from us eating unhealthy. So we can keep people healthier. And if it then goes wrong, Taboos is one of like the startups I'm involved in. They're about asynchronous doctor visits. Hey, you might want to go and visit a doctor in the flesh today in most cases, but when would you not want to do that? Well, when the subject might be a little bit of a taboo, like if you have an odor, or if you are having like certain problems between your legs. You might not want at that moment to go and physically be in front of a doctor. And this is where like remote consultations can be done that can be asynchronous. The bot can ask you to do certain things, can take a look and recommend to the doctor to take an action. If the doctor agrees, it can be as simple as in 10 seconds, they agree with the prescription and diagnose. So that same doctor can see so many more patients than ever before and can offer a lot cheaper than before. Now, since we're all technologists here, let me take some approach of something closer home. And I just, before talking, this put a blog post about the distributed cloud. And it's a little bit ironic because in 2009, I started trying to convince people to go to cloud computing and stop using data centers. And now I'm saying stop using cloud computing and go towards distributed cloud. But the reason is this: if you can see my screen, you can see that I'm holding the camera that like is shown there. And this is a quite heavy 4K security camera. What do you think a 4K security camera nowadays cost? I only see Ken and Baxter, but I already asked them questions. So let's see, Ricardo. What does a 4K security camera cost nowadays?
Depends from 25 quids to 100 probably.
Yeah, not a bad guess. So I bought this one for under £70 on Amazon. You can, of course, get security cameras for 20. They tend to be SD or HD quality. I'm talking about 4K quality. And the difference here is that's 50 times more data between a 4K and an SD camera. Most of our cameras are still SD. So if you would zoom in on faces, you'd if they're a couple of meters away, you wouldn't be able to recognize a face. Whereas with 4K, you could basically count their wrinkles. So that is a great advantage, but also one of the biggest disadvantages of cloud computing, because we don't have the telecom capacity and we don't have the cloud willingness to pay the cloud bills to really, in every small, let's say, coffee shop, for instance, go and like stream gigabytes, terabytes, potentially with multiple shops together, petabytes of data of very little useful information each image. So what we need to do, and that's the new way of like compute, is bring the compute to the data instead of the data to the compute. So some time ago, there was this like coffee shop AI barista tracking video that went viral, where like if you had like some AI accelerator on or next to your camera, you could like have it count how many cups each barista was serving and how long a client was sitting in the coffee shop. That is actually the type of information that is useful to headquarters. The rest they don't necessarily care about. So basically being able to ask that camera to give you information about like who was the most productive barista and who was not, and how productive were they, and how much is the average like customer staying in the shop, and how's the distribution of that, are the real questions you want to ask to cameras. And for that, one of my other clients has open source Bacalhau, which is Portuguese for cod, and is one of the first distributed AI and compute platforms out there that allow you to make this type of solutions. If you afterwards want the slides, you'll find that there's links in there. One is Catch, which is camera on the edge, which explains this. And I also wrote another blog post about like how we can go away from like having devices. So for instance, I spoke to a Chinese TV producer company, and they were sending logs of thousands and thousands of TVs. They would then like manipulate them and import them into a data lake and then do data reporting, dashboarding, and events there. And the problem was that like they would also always have like a small number of devices giving errors, but not enough information would be exported from all of these to then be able to very quickly find out what was wrong. So what I propose is to work the other way around, to put like compute nodes, and that can be in the shape of a very small app on each Android TV in this case, or like a small app on your PC, or an IoT gateway, or a network device, or whatever compute you have, and that can then can index everything happening on that device, so that you as an operational admin can ask like, hey, did any of the devices give any such problems? You get now a list of the 50 in 10,000 that give this problem. And now you can go directly to one of those devices and say, can you give me this log and that log and find the problem? And even potentially deploy a workaround on those 50 devices that like reboots or restarts a process while you work on a bug fix. But it could also be used by business people, for instance, if these are Android TVs, to see which apps people use, and so on, to then like use it for business compliance or whatever. And you can learn more about like this by looking at the blog post I recently put out. Now, what other sectors are going to be disrupted by NextTech? Well, airlines, logistics, travel. So at the top here, this drone is the first certified robotaxi drone in China. So you can pay to fly in a 2-person robotaxi from one place to another one in China now. In the US, you have Zipline, and they are basically able to transport anything. They started with, like in Africa, with medicine and blood and so on to be transported very quickly to hospitals and so on. But then when COVID hit, everybody wanted Zipline to transport vaccines everywhere in the world. So one of the key things here is that, like in logistics, we tend to have a spoke and wheel architecture where like you have certain airports that all airlines use as central hubs, and from there, hub and spoke is the word, and from there they fly to others. That is completely going to be disrupted with like drones that can fly directly from point A to point B and bring stuff or people. And if we all want to go on holidays next week in about 10 years' time to New Zealand, well, we can take one of those like SpaceX rockets, and an hour later we would be landing in New Zealand. Some trip to the moon would also be possible. So again, travel will change completely. In other areas, jewelry and mining. So these are factory created diamonds, and they're like 1 carat diamonds used to be thousands and thousands of pounds. You can now get them for tens, if not less, pounds from the Chinese factories that basically mass produce them. You can also see another disruption happening with RISC-V. If you haven't not heard of it, they're the new open source processors. So the design is open source, just like the Linux kernel. Multiple groups contribute code to the design. And this is becoming a very big headache for Intel, ARM, and NVIDIA, who until now said designs of chips need to be expensive and chips need to be expensive. Education, coaching, parenting, another example of where I'm working with is HI, and it's about like, how can we like make that relationship between a 6-year-old and a parent completely different by introducing AI and spatial awards and so on. And then another one where I'm also fractional CTO is like how to disrupt the future of marketing and agencies with Contented, and how to like have a decentralized agency where anybody can join and be part of it. And that brings me to the last disruption, where I'm building in my free time a startup, and you can't see a lot yet, but it's going to be called Superhuman.work, and it's about can we use the 20x to 100x productivity AI brings in new ways? And to explain that to you in very simple terms, if you look at a lawyer, they used to be able to, based on like some Word template, create 5 contracts for 5 customers every day and charge like a customer 1,000 for that contract. So they would earn 5,000 a day. Now, ChatGPT already passed the bar exam, so that same lawyer can just ask it to create 100 or 500 contracts and then sell them for 200 after they have gone through them to fix all the hallucinations that happen in 1 out of 100, 3 out of 100, and then they can make 20,000 a day. So as long as like you can bring the right tools to specific professions, and I'm not focusing only on lawyers, but anybody that like through Gen AI can be made 20 times more productive, bring them the right tools, bring them 20 times or 100 times more work, and the way we work could go from like working for organizations to working for platforms. Like we're already seeing with Uber, where the driver is listening to the algorithm to drive wherever they will be paid to pick up the next user. So you have a choice today. You can ignore all of the things I've said today and focusing on solving today's problems with yesterday's tools. You can focus on like today's problems and use today's tools and use them to build solutions. Or, and this is what I call the Simon Wortley mapping thing. And I worked with Simon because he was strategist before I was that at Ubuntu. And look at Simon and Wortley mapping because you can predict the problems technology is going to provoke tomorrow and use some of the technologies I talked about to create solutions with tomorrow's tools for those problems. And what will happen is that, like, because it often takes a day to build a solution, option 3 is the only option where tomorrow you will have a solution for today's problem with today's technology at a price that is cheaper than all yesterday's solutions, while you will be earning more. And that's a pretty hard combination to beat if you're on the wrong side of it. I hope you found it interesting.
Thank you, Maarten. Really appreciate that. I'll open that up to the group then. What who's got some thoughts or questions or anything to share?
Everybody updating their CV now.
I see Ken's unmuted, Alex is unmuted. I'd be keen to get some
I just wanted to say thank you very much. It was fascinating. I may not have stayed on camera the whole time, but I was listening the whole time. And I don't really have any important questions to ask, but I thought I'd better give some sort of reaction, give people a chance to think of a question as well. Was it Ken you said who'd come under?
I was trying to put my hand up. That's why I unmuted myself. Where do you think? Obviously, there's a lot of compelling things to look at. And if you look at probably the roles that we have, where we go into businesses trying to solve either yesterday's problems or today's problems with today's solutions, so much of those solutions today revolves around people and building teams and having people in the business that give the right kind of input into the business and can own things. Where do you think, and I guess there's probably a whole heap of stuff on this that's happening, where do you think this is going to take kind of from a society point of view, where effectively you can have a lawyer that can make £20,000 a day, but he doesn't need to recruit any admin assistants because he's got technology that will do that for him. So do you think, although it's all very compelling that you hear about what technology can do to help us work, and I guess that's always been the goal of any technology, whether it's succeeded or not, what's the kind of thinking of what's that going to do to a society where, it will effectively reward a few and seriously undermine a majority?
Yeah, very good question. I wanted to pick up something first on something you said initially, because one thing is, where will society be in 10 years, but what can you do tomorrow might be more interesting. So you said like, hey, I'm working a lot on like today's problems with today's tools, or sometimes yesterday's tools. One of the things I did at Legal in general, where like I always found that people introduced me as like, here's Maarten, he speaks in a language. And I was always like confused. Yes, I speak 5 languages, but I think my English is good enough for you to understand. Why are you introducing me as speaking another language? And one of the things I quickly learned was that like I was using technical terms that people didn't understand. In insurance, nobody had ever heard about an API, because the way the business had run until now was very isolated from the rest of the industries. So there was no reason to talk to other industries. So nobody had ever thought about the word API. And when I tend to ask around of like, what type of like problems do you have and what type of solution do you need? What I would hear very often would be, hey, we get all these like papers written by doctors and we can't read them. I need an AI that like is 99.99% good at recognizing even the worst handwritten document. And that's when it came up to me that like, when you get asked to do something and solve a technology challenge, never ask for the solution they want, but ask for the core problem. And I started calling them Harry Potter problems, because I wanted to move away from like, hey, I have this problem and with the right budget and the right people, I know how to solve it. Because those tend to push you towards like that area of like, can you make another copy of something you've done 100 million times? What I did was like, give me your Harry Potter problem, the type of critical business problem that you have no clue who to give your money to, or you've tried solving many times and they always failed. And then I got more interesting problems to work on. And the problems I had, for instance, was how to make it that like in home insurance, you basically would like pay as fast as possible to honest customers, and like find as many dishonest customers when they file a claim. And we solved that very easily with like an AI bot that asked people if they like filed a claim for a broken television to make pictures and videos of it, which the honest one could, and they got their Amazon voucher a minute later, and the dishonest one couldn't, and searched them on Google search, and then like we did reverse search and found them. Long story short, I found a lot of times that like using these new technologies, you can make completely new ways of working, whereby like you both destroy existing jobs and create new jobs that didn't exist before. So in the very short term, the amount of current jobs that will be destroyed will be higher than we've ever seen, but there will also be a set of new jobs created that we don't know yet that we need. Think about mobile app designer, UX designer, influencer, all these type of things 20 years ago didn't exist because we didn't need them. Unfortunately, and this is Ken, where you're very right, we might and we will get into a point where like the destruction of job types will be faster than the creation of new types. And that will be because these Optimus humanoids and all these other things will be able to become so good that we as humans can't compete with them. And the same with AI. But my prediction is that like that can happen in the next 20 years, but that also means that like the majority of us will not have to be working full time. I think we'll see a future where a lot of bots and AI will do the work and provide us with enough food, energy, clothing, shelter, whatever we need, plus a basic income to spend on whatever optional things we want, for most people to not have to work. And it will then be a life decision if you still want to work 1 day a week to feel that is your mission, that's your goal, to work 5 days a week because like you're one of the very few exceptions that basically either is a complete workaholic or does something that like the robots haven't done yet, or focus your future on other things that like bring more value to society than you just being 24/7 occupied with like work. So the future of work will be that most humans don't have to do it. But that is not going to be now. That's going to be at least one, probably more, multiple decades away. And realistically, if 1 or 2 trillionaires will want a world where they get all the money and we basically become poor, then probably we'll see a revolution where they end up dying. And then afterwards, universal income will be introduced because of that. But that's only one scenario that can happen.
Brilliant. Thanks, Maarten.
Maarten, we've had a question in the chat from Kat, who I think is just about to head off, but is going to catch on the recording. But he said, if you get time, my question would have been about how do you see the software developer role evolving?
Yes, so basically the software developer role, just writing pure code, Gen AI will do. So the prompt programmer is going to be more important than the code writing programmer. That doesn't mean that like the prompt programmer doesn't have to be a programmer. If you've ever played around with Midjourney or something else and then seen a professional play around with it, you might be good, but they're better. And this is where like, yeah, for as much as anybody would ask for code to be written, there will be glitches. There will be bad ways of doing it and good ways of doing it. So in the shorter term, we don't necessarily see programmers going away. It will be more that like test cases and deployments and converting Figma to the first version of React will be automated. It will also be very much used in like security. Can you look at the code and find security issues and fix them? So those type of things are in the short term. In the medium to long term, of course, like I said, bio programming will come in other places. And there will be a reduction on like pure programming as we know it now. But being close to NextTech hopefully means that you can like transition to other things. And that is my recommendation to everybody. Don't assume your current job to be like the Japanese jobs used to be, where you came out of school and you retired in the same company. That's not the future. We even don't know if companies are going to be the best way of organizing jobs in the future. I personally don't think so, and that's one of the things I want to prove with my startup.
Fascinating stuff. Brilliant. Okay, I will draw it to a close then there. I'm just going to pop Maarten's LinkedIn there. Highly recommend you all connect and fire any other questions and support and comments and all that kind of stuff Maarten's way. Thanks everyone for joining us. Huge thank you, Maarten. Was there anything you wanted to say in closing at all?
Yeah, so basically what I do professionally, I help people that want to bring more innovation. So please bring some Harry Potter problems to me and I'll wave my magical wand and hopefully make them go away. I can only promise though that like I can fail faster and cheaper than anybody else. Not that I am able to solve all of them.
Great stuff. All right. Well, thank you once again, Maarten. Really appreciate that. And we will see you all on the next session. Thanks, Al.
Thank you, Martin. Good session. Cheers.